Seinfeld ran for 9 seasons, nearly 200 episodes, and is consistently lauded as one of, if not the, best written TV show that has ever existed. And even though the show did end after season 9 in 1998, Jerry Seinfeld himself was actually offered $5 million an episode to keep the show going. He turned that down. He turned down like $110 million, and thus, the juggernaut that was Seinfeld was over. But with the studio willing to throw so much towards a potential season 10 for the series, it would make sense that a bunch of different studios would still try to salvage some scraps from the show. Sure, Jerry Seinfeld himself was moving on for now, but what about everyone else? The core cast of Seinfeld wasn't just him. There were 3 other wonderful comedians. But for a while, it seemed like the shows that they were all trying to helm were doomed to fail. This is the story of the Seinfeld curse. The Michael Richards Show. Seinfeld was such a popular series that it's had many breakout characters throughout its run, but of them all, Kramer is probably the most widely loved. I mean, Michael Richards won 3 Emmys. At the end of the show's run, he was a household name. So of all of the actors who could have possibly been right for their own show, he seemed like the best bet. And thus, The Michael Richards Show was born, created by a few Seinfeld writers and, of course, Michael Richards. The show would see Michael Richards playing a private detective by the name of Vic Nardoza, which, does it make much sense for the main character in a show to have a different name than the show, if the show's name is the main actor's name? Like, it seems needlessly confusing. Look at Seinfeld. The actor was playing a fictional version of themselves, still named Jerry Seinfeld. But the main character in the Michael Richards Show, who's played by Michael Richards, is named Vic Nardoza. Just a weird gripe I had. The show would premiere October 24th and would air weekly for the next 2 months, before being cancelled after only 8 episodes, with an unaired pilot still kind of existing out there somewhere in the void. Reviews were incredibly negative. I watched what I could find of the series, and it's a little rough. In their premiere episode, there's this part where Tim Meadows' character is storming out of a room. It's supposed to be something of a serious moment. The audience, who's been laughing at all the jokes, with jokes in heavy quotations, is very quiet. Tim Meadows trips over something on the ground during his run out. Why was this left in the cut? It's not a joke, no one laughs, and they laugh at everything. William Devon, who played a major character on the show, would later say in an interview, "They needed Larry David, you know? Ultimately, the showrunner is the guy who gets it right every day before you shoot. The other guys write them and whatever, but ultimately the showrunner is the guy who makes it work. And they didn't have a guy who could make it work." With him also saying that Michael Richards had a warped sense of what the show actually was and referring to the entire experience as a disaster. The show would be canceled December 19th of 2000, going from 13.19 million viewers for the show's premiere to 5.63 million views by the show's end. And Michael Richards never went on to do anything controversial in the next 6 years. Bob Patterson. Chronologically, the next series that a main Seinfeld actor would attempt to lead would be Jason Alexander in Bob Patterson. He's playing the titular Bob Patterson, a self-help guru. Already a less confusing setup than the Michael Richards Show. The twist here being that Bob Patterson is making his living telling people how to live their lives, despite his home life being something of a mess. There's a lot less to say for this show than there is for the Michael Richards Show. I think it feels like a much more complete show, and it could have had legs if it were given more time. Like, comparing the two shows, this one feels like the one that could have ran for a few seasons. But from what I've seen, I do have to agree with a lot of critics. The show, at the end of the day, just wasn't really that funny, despite them really wanting to be. It kind of shows that despite being a fantastic comedic actor, the writing is absolutely essential. When it comes down to how many viewers the show was getting at the end of its run, that's maybe a small bit of contention. Jason Alexander himself claims the ratings were actually on the rise, but Googling it and common sense kind of say they weren't. The show would air from October to November of 2001 before being canceled after just 5 episodes, with 5 of the episodes that were filmed and ready to go now being lost, with only part of what would have been the 9th episode having been found. Watching Ellie. Of all the shows we've talked about, I think that this one is the strangest, both in terms of what's happened with the show's production and airing and everything, and also the show's actual premise. So the show itself, starring Julia Louis-Dreyfus, who plays the titular Ellie, started off as a real look at 22 minutes of Ellie's life. It was a realistic 22 minutes, with a timer in the bottom corner, so everything that happens in the episode happens in real time. It's not terribly dissimilar to the series 24, but a good bit less serialized. This is how the first 10 episodes of the series would air, from February to April of 2002. And while the show wasn't cancelled, it was placed on an indefinite hiatus. The final 3 episodes of the first season that were filmed and ready have never actually aired. Those 3 episodes are now also considered lost media. And that could have been the end of the show, but instead it popped back up almost exactly a year later. While it had the same characters and plot and everything, the style and general format of the show were completely different. Now it was airing as a much more traditional sitcom. And hey, what do you know, it fared even worse after those changes that I'm sure the network executives were pushing for. This time the season would run for 6 more episodes before, once again, being pulled from the air. This is probably the best of the 3 shows that I've talked about so far, at least from what I've seen, and mainly just the first core that ran. But I can see why a show like this wouldn't have been wildly popular. It's similar in a sense to Seinfeld. That was a show about nothing. This is a show that's about as slice of life as you can get. On paper, they sound like they could be similar, but I think that actually sort of works against it. The format for the show was definitely its biggest selling point, but also its greatest weakness. It's incredibly limiting. So it's not terribly surprising that they would try to reformat everything before finally giving the show the axe. Listen up. Here's the final show that was seemingly subjected to the Seinfeld curse. Jason Alexander's second major attempt as a leading man post-Seinfeld. Of all of the shows that we've talked about so far, this one is the most, well, right down the middle. Like, it's by far the most average in terms of story, comedy, characters, everything. And that's how it was reviewed as well. A lot of critics were torn on this. Some thought it was good, some didn't. Maybe because of how utterly average the show actually was, it ran longer than all of the other series we've talked about. 22 episodes, a full season. They only really got that. And the viewership, though it definitely waned by the end, was pretty consistent, even if at its height it wasn't exactly bringing everyone together to watch. The series would run from September of 2004 to April of 2005, and despite the average to above average ratings the show was getting, it was cancelled, with the reason given being rising costs. So, with all of these failed projects in the rear view, the question comes down to, is the curse real? I personally think the answer is yes. And no. Siebentje. In a way, the real curse that they were facing was actually the lasting and ever-present popularity that was Seinfeld itself. The show, not the man. With its clever writing, memorable characters, and unique sense of humor, Seinfeld captured the hearts of audiences, and has remained a beloved classic for decades. But with their immense talent, it's no surprise that the actors of Seinfeld experienced their fair share of success after the show ended in 1998. Jerry Seinfeld, the star and co-creator, continued to thrive in the entertainment industry after the show wrapped up. He went on multiple stand-up comedy tours, and his web series, Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee, was a hit. And don't even get me started on B-Movie. Michael Richards had a bit more of a tumultuous road after Seinfeld. He faced controversy and backlash after using racial slurs during a stand-up comedy performance, causing some to question whether he would be able to bounce back from the incident. However, Richards eventually returned to television with a guest starring role on Curb Your Enthusiasm, proving he did still have some talent. Jason Alexander, who played the lovable but scheming George Costanza, also faced challenges after Seinfeld ended. While he continued to act in both TV and film, it wasn't always easy for him to find roles as prominent as he had on the show. Nevertheless, Alexander persevered and has had a successful career in the years following Seinfeld. As Elaine on the legendary sitcom Seinfeld, Julia Louis-Dreyfus captured audiences with her wit, charm, and enduring presence on the show. But when Seinfeld came to an end in '98, she was faced with the daunting task of moving on from such a beloved and iconic role and finding new opportunities in the entertainment industry. But let's be real, if there's one thing we know about Julia Louis-Dreyfus, it's that she doesn't back down from a challenge. The talented actress proved that she was more than just Elaine, taking on new roles and projects that allowed her to showcase her range and versatility. And hot dang did she deliver. Louis-Dreyfus received critical acclaim and numerous awards for her time on Veep, and she continues to be in high demand for new roles and projects. Ultimately, the actors of Seinfeld were able to overcome any typecasting that may have been associated with their roles on the show and prove their range and versatility as actors. When Julia Louis-Dreyfus won an Emmy in 2007, she famously declared, "I'm not somebody who really believes in curses, but curse this baby." It seems that the actors of Seinfeld have nothing to fear from any sort of curse. With their talent, hard work, and dedication to their craft, they've proven themselves to be successful and enduring figures in the entertainment industry. Some believe the curse is real, citing examples such as untimely deaths of several cast members and the struggles of many people associated with the show. Others, however, argue that these events are simply coincidences and that the curse is nothing more than baseless myth. Despite the lack of conclusive evidence, the legend of the Seinfeld curse continues to fascinate fans of the show. Is it real or just a coincidence? You decide. But one thing is for sure, Seinfeld will always be remembered as a television classic, curse or not. But anyways, this has been 10K Bill, and thanks for watching. Comment down below what you'd like to hear me talk about next. Support us on our Patreon if you like this content and want to see more like it. And of course, make sure you subscribe for all your entertainment-related content.